Hello and welcome to chapter 16. Here's Florence Nightingale encouraging you to continue. So this chapter is going to be talking about drugs that affect the endocrine system, so primarily glandular medications. And then diabetes will be covered separately in chapter 17. So we have hormones and drugs for osteoporosis, and so we have 16 pages in the textbook, and then in the ATI you can read chapters 27 and 35, and then pages 252 to 256 to learn about drugs for osteoporosis. So we're going to talk about hormone replacement, medications for thyroid issues, both hypo and hyper, medications for adrenal gland problems, and then we'll talk about various sex hormones and the meds for those. And then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about drugs that help rebuild bones in the process or in the event of osteoporosis. So we're going to be talking about hormones and steroids, both regular that are made by the body, natural, and synthetic. So we have both types that are made, both types that are used, depending on what is going on with physical issues. So we use these to either add to the hormones and steroids you're already making, or replace them completely if there is a situation where you need help making these substances. So just as sort of a brief recap of the endocrine system, we know that the endocrine system is for regulation and coordination of the whole entire body. If your endocrine system isn't working right, you're going to have all sorts of issues all over the body. And so it is what we refer to as our endocrine glands that produce our hormones and our steroids. And endocrine has to do with something about the fact that they're all made to work in the body, as opposed to exocrine glands where things are excreted outside of the body. So these are just a quick rundown of what we'll be talking about for the most part. So, of course, the pituitary gland is the biggest deal because it's known as the, what kind of gland? Yes, master gland, and it controls all the other ones. Now, for some weird reason, the textbook doesn't even cover issues with the pituitary, so we are going to cover it using outside information and the ATI book. So I do not know why something called the master gland would not be covered in this textbook, but there's a few things about this textbook I'm not really sure about, and that's one of them. But the pituitary is extremely important. We also, deep in the head, have a little gland called the pineal gland, and it produces a substance called melatonin that helps to regulate our sleep cycles. And we make quite a bit of it in our younger years. Gradually, as we age, function of the pineal gland begins to slow down. We don't produce as much natural melatonin, and that's part of the reason why elderly people have weird sleep cycles once in a while. The thymus gland, as you've already learned when you studied the immune system, plays a huge role in creating T cells and regulating immune function. Not so much when we're older because it begins to kind of atrophy, but hopefully it's done its job in our younger years, and it's very important in the immune system of babies and children. We have the thyroid that controls metabolism and activity of really the entire body, but very, very centered on the nervous system. Behind the thyroids, we have usually 4 to 6 little glands referred to as the parathyroid. Some people will have 8. but they regulate calcium levels throughout the body. And there was a time when scientists and doctors didn't even realize we had those parathyroid glands, and they'd wonder why when someone had their thyroid removed, all of a sudden they'd start having a bunch of calcium issues. And now we know that they're there and they can be taken care of even in the event of thyroid removal. The adrenal glands are very, very important as far as producing various hormones. They influence our metabolism, regulate our electrolytes, and help us react to stress. Our pancreas is hugely important when it comes to blood sugar levels and allowing us to have enough glucose, because as you remember, that's the nutrition that the brain needs to function. And we'll talk about the pancreas in chapter 17. Then we have our testes and ovaries, known as the gonads, and they are in place at birth and begin to regulate secondary sex characteristics and begin to become more functional as we get older and reach childbearing age. And then we have the placenta, and the placenta is a fascinating organ because it's really the only temporary endocrine organ. It rises from the same cells that make up the fetus, so it's not really part of the mother, it's part of the fetus. But it produces enough hormones to maintain the pregnancy. It also helps to filter out waste products and bring in what the fetus needs to grow and thrive, like food and oxygen. And then when it's done, it departs the body and is thrown away or planted or fried up and eaten, whatever you choose to do with it. So that's kind of the quick endocrine system in a nutshell, and we're just going to be talking about various parts of this as we go through this lesson. So of course in your book we've got the picture of the various glands of the endocrine system with both the types of available gonads found in the lower part of the body, either ovaries for the biological female and testes for the biological male. So I'm going to stop right here before we get into the master gland. So make sure you have read at least the introduction to this chapter, and then we're going to kind of get into the ATI book, since the textbook doesn't really contain anything about the pituitary.